So good afternoon, everybody. We are close to the end, so be patient, bear with me. I'll try to be quick. The talk will be about effects of non-management on biodiversity and ecosystem function of a Mediterranean system. Okay, just a brief outline. How are we doing in dealing with conservation in a human-shaped world? Then I'll go to the specific topic, an example of the human-shaped Mediterranean oak savannas. And then I'll present some data on effects of non-management on the function of this system. And then discuss a bit, is wilderness an option on this system, and some conclusions. I like very much this picture because it really shows us what is there. We live in a human-shaped world. So this figure from Peter Carive in Science shows shipping lanes and road networks all over the world. And it's very, very difficult to find a place where human influence is not seen. And this is just direct effects. We can maybe think about global change, effects of fertilization, carbon, whatever. But even if we look to these regions, whiteness regions, where theoretically we have less human influence, we also have some very interesting studies. For example, showing that many of central forests in Central America, secondary forests, their diversity was shaped by human influence. For example, Maya civilization. Or closer to Europe studies, this interesting study showing this, how species richness on the seed bank varies with distance from human settlements and higher diversity of land species close to the human settlements. This is perfect natural. People bring culture, bring species for their survival. They mix different kinds of species. In some instances, they can increase diversity. When we move to the Mediterranean, well, we all know this is the cradle of human civilizations. So humans have been interacting with the landscape for tens of thousands of years. Dorians, Ionians, Greek people, Phoenicians, whatever, they've all lived here for thousands of years. And interesting, this is a biodiversity hotspot as well, as everybody knows. So about 25,000 plant species, 50% of them endemic, 8% of the world plant species on just 1.6% of terrestrial surface. Much of the European flora is from the Mediterranean, and we can also look for the vertebrate endemics that occur in this area. And this interaction between humans and landscape created very interesting systems, socio-ecological systems, as I'm calling here. I just give some examples of Portugal, but we can find these kind of systems all over Europe and the world indeed. Northeast Portugal, sorry. Lameiros, it's the name of this system, net irrigated pastures that create landscape diversity, which is so interesting for many wildlife species. The extensive cereal fields of southern Portugal and Spain, which are so important for the conservation of big birds like the great bustard or the little bustard, they are much dependent on this cereal field system. If we lose these systems, we'll be losing these species. And the example that I've been working for the last few years, our cork oak, olm oak savannas, typical from the Western Mediterranean basin. So this is just a typical picture, very diverse structure. Olm and cork oak, they are endemic from the Western Mediterranean basin, so both Southern Europe and North Africa. They are a classified habitat under the Pan-European Network of Protected Areas, Natura 2000. They have high conservation value. And particularly in the case of cork oak, cork, the tree bark, is the main economic activity, but also grazing, hunting, different crops occur in this system. Just a few nice pictures on the wildlife that occurs there, and it's much dependent on the heterogeneity of this system. Thanks to Christian for showing some of these pictures before. From the imperial eagle to the Iberian lynx, rabbits, red-legged. And sometimes the grassland diversity is forgotten. This is just a plant inventory from an experimental place that we have in southern Portugal, with over 120 species found over 5 years. They replace every year, so this is a very important component of the biodiversity of these systems that much frequently is forgotten. This is an experimental plot that we have in one of these systems. It shows an abandonment scenario. It's a 12-year-old experimental exclosure with no management at all, so no cut of shrubs, no grazing, no agriculture crops. And after 12 years, we get this appearance. So I'm just focusing in some of management implications, of non-management implications on the functioning of the system. From arrested sucession to the soil water content, tree shrubs interactions, grassland diversity, and the question so important in the Mediterranean, the wildfire. So going to the first point, this was a nice work published by a colleague of ours some time ago, where she investigated how the progressing of ecological succession on this system in three different environments, and one of those was the shrubland, so abandoned parcels, and the other was the tree cover, either more sparse, what she called savanna, or more close, what she called forest. And the proportion of seeds remaining in the shrubland is much lower and decreases faster than the other types. Similar to seed germination, lower than the forest or the savanna cover, and also the seedling survival. So what Vanda is arguing in his paper is that in this particular shrubland type, there is no progression to the woodland, what they called arrested succession. This also data that we got from measurements on these abandoned plots. Basically, we had resistivity, electric resistivity transects, and we can measure the water content till 3 meters depth outside the plot and inside the plot. So you have the exclosure here, and the reddish means less water. And it was very clear, the difference in the water content, and it's easier to explain. It's mainly transpiration by this very dense, tall shrub, which is a particular species, Cistus ladanifer. But this shows a clear effect on the water in the soil. Another study that used the occurrence of a very dry year, 2012 was a drought event, and investigated different physiological parameters in plots with shrubs and without shrubs. So basically the experiment was looking for tree physiology responses in plots with this shrub cover, and at the mid of the experiment they cut the shrubs and continued measuring the physiological responses. Here is transpiration, and what is seen is that the trees where they didn't have the shrubs, in this particularly dry year, had more resilience and resistance and recovery faster than the trees that were in the shrub-invaded plots. In normal years, with normal precipitation, there was no differences. So this was particularly a very dry 2012 year. Grassland diversity, we have been measuring this parameter over the years. And what is interesting was that when we set up the exclosures, and there was no shrubs when we set up the exclosures, the diversity was indeed started to be higher where the exclosures were set, but then it decreased. It became higher in the managed plots. And then here we have again the very, very dry 2012 year causing this very deep decrease. Not very difficult to explain. So here the shrub is encroaching the parcel, is competing with the grasslands, and sometimes you don't find grasslands underneath the shrub. And finally, the risk of severe wildfires. This picture was taken in 2004. We had a big fire year in Algarve, in southern Portugal. This is a cork oak woodland in that region. And I like to show this picture because of this square, the only managed plot where the trees managed to stay green, because it was used by someone which managed the land, in this case keeping low shrub vegetation. All the remaining area got this aspect. We have modeled fire behavior in these abandoned plots and managed and unmanaged. These are very preliminary results. And for example, the rate of fire spread almost 6 times higher in unmanaged plots. Fire intensity, the scorch height, and the problem is if the shrub touches the tree canopy, then we have the transition of the fire to the tree crown, which is a very severe and drastic wildfire. If the shrub is close to the soil, there is no transition to the crown, and maybe the tree will be able to survive. So just brief conclusions. We live in a human-shaped world, and I think this is very important. We must look to the conservation value of productive ecosystems. And when I say productive, I'm thinking about provisioning services. They are giving us provisioning services, but they are giving us other kind of services, and in several instances, they are providing us with biodiversity. And the provocative statement, I think we should look also to the productive value of conservation value ecosystems. The example of the Mediterranean cork oak savannas, they are human-shaped ecosystems of high conservation value maintained through human use. And what happens when they are not managed is that they will change ecological functioning, and we may have unexpectedly effects on biodiversity and ecosystem services. So we need careful evaluation when considering non-management options in these and in other Mediterranean ecosystems that have lived for thousands of years with human influence and human interactions. And, well, we need to discuss this, of course. Is an option? Yes, it's an option, but we need, I re-emphasize this, we need to carefully consider all the effects that in some cases are unexpected. So we have a conservation value system that may change to a system with lower conservation value, but of course it is an option. But this needs to be carefully assessed. I would like to stop with a very nice sentence. I find it a very nice sentence. Just a brief explanation to the picture. Cork is extracted in a very traditional way here in Spain and in Portugal with this kind of particular axe. And I like this sentence from Aldo Leopold, the father of conservation ethics and one of the big names of the beginning of the conservation movement in the United States. And basically says that I have read many definitions of what is a conservationist and written not a few myself. but I suspect that the best one is written not with a pen, but with an axe. It is a matter of what a man thinks about while chopping, or while deciding what to chop. A conservationist is one who is humbly aware that with each stroke is writing his signature on the face of his land. Signatures, of course, differ, whether written with an axe or a pen, and this is as it should be. So I think this is a beautiful definition of conservation through wise use. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention. Thanks very much.